All right. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for joining. This is the third deep dive into the accelerated breeding goals for 2025. And if people can just keep themselves on mute, that would be appreciated. The purpose of this is just to go a little bit deeper and to really make sure that everybody is clear about what the goal is specifically, and to try and get a little bit more information about how to be successful in implementing each of the respective goals by understanding what specifically is needing to change from the current situation to meeting that goal. These ones today are that we're talking about are goals number 5 and 6. Number 5 is around meeting minimum standards for the various aspects of the breeding program that are related to the genetic gain that's going to be achieved. And then number 6 is around those changes that can drastically increase your rate of genetic gain. And so these are things that through Excellence in Breeding and then Accelerated Breeding Initiative, we've been talking about for many years. None of these are new, but this combination is really what came out of a number of discussions with breeding teams, including being heavily influenced by the discussions that were had during the Dubai meeting last year. And so all of these goals have been presented to the breeding leads and endorsed by the breeding leads. They agree that these are the things that are going to drive their success. And so we're now having these deep dives with a broader audience so that everybody can be clear on exactly what the goal is, and we can have a discussion about how to be most successful in achieving these goals. So to kick us off, Dorcas Gamanet is going to present these two goals to us all, and when she is finished, then we'll open it up for questions and discussion. So thank you, Dorcas, and over to you. If you've got me on the agenda to give comments, then I'll let you decide on whether I've covered that off already, or whether there are further comments for me to make. Over to you, Dorcas. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. I think you covered the opening remarks already. I did have you on the agenda anyway. Yeah. Okay. Just share this. All right. Yeah. As Michael mentioned, hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are. We are continuing with this series on deep dives to the accelerated breeding goals, high-level goals for 2025. And it's an information sharing meeting where we'll provide information and we will have a discussion around that information. Today, we're focusing on goals number 5 and 6, with the intended outcome out of this meeting being
It was
that
confusing. He just want you to confirm something. Yes, so that.
Inusa, please, if you can mute yourself. Thank you. So we hope that the breeding teams understand AB goals 5 and 6, what is expected of the breeding teams, what levels of engagement to expect with the cross-cutting teams, and where to seek support from. So I'll go straight, of course, to review our breeding strategy and what we mean by it, that each crop breeding program is running a number of breeding pipelines. Each of those pipelines is serving either one or several market segments, and each market segment has a unique TPP, as we have discussed in goals number 1 and 2 previously. And so to each TPP or to each market segment is allocated a breeding effort, and then a breeding scheme needs to be built around that breeding effort and optimized for efficiency. Today, we are then focusing goals 5 and 6, focus on the breeding efforts and the breeding schemes that the breeding teams are implementing. Goal number 5, as mentioned, is around meeting the minimum standards of a breeding program, and it's focused on ensuring that all breeding teams have in place the minimum standards needed for a successful breeding program. This means that the breeding programs cannot be successful without having these foundations first, and trying to implement more advanced methods without having these minimum standards in place leads to little or no progress at all. For goals number 5 and 6, I want to highlight here that for several of the things that we'll be discussing, we do have a number of Accelerate guidelines that can be found in the Excellence in Breeding Toolbox using that link, that you can find support from the Accelerate cross-cutting team, which is normally in contact with your teams, a team of quantitative geneticists that are interacting with your crop teams. Some support will need to come from breeding resources, and if you're working with network partnerships, support will need to come from our Transform team. Most of you have seen this pyramid of priorities. We have discussed with the team, several teams, about getting the basics in place first before trying to implement more sophisticated methods within the breeding program, as mentioned, because you will meet little or no progress if you try to do the reverse of this. So, of course, at the base of the pyramid is understanding what you're breeding for, making sure you can define your breeding schemes and that you can manage your data. Then you can go into things like, what is the size of my program? How do I manage genetic variations? Can I assay all my essential traits? And you work your way up the pyramid. So we have been, of course, throughout Accelerated Breeding Initiative time, we have been talking about several of these minimum standards and what are those practices. The expectation is that 100% of pipelines implement these best practices and minimum standards. These include documenting breeding schemes using the right JAMPLAS in place, and as the list continues. And now we will go into discussing each one of those, what is the ask, and how you can implement that and why you need those in the next slides. So the first of the minimum standard is, of course, to document the breeding schemes. Thank you very much. If you can mute yourself. The ask here is that all programs document and formalize crossing, evaluation, and selection decisions. If you remember, this is how we define the breeding scheme. And how can you achieve this? By logging into the breeding scheme manager and documenting your breeding scheme. Where Accelerated cross-cutting team presented about how to go about this, but they are also available to provide support on doing this. And why would this be important is that if you have a well-rationalized breeding scheme, it makes it easier for you to visualize and discuss your breeding schemes with your colleagues or research leaders or funders, even if they are non-specialists, and that you can work with specialists like the Accelerate cross-cutting team to optimize your breeding scheme using simulations and other retrospective analysis. You can forecast and estimate your needs for the pipeline because you know which numbers are moving at what stage. And so you can know what you need for QA, QC, marker-assisted selection, genomic selection at each stage. And with this, it's easier to cost the breeding activities because you know the numbers. And this can help you make a stronger investment case for your program. And information can also be extracted from this for standard reports that can help monitor progress and changes over time. The next minimum standard is using the right JAMPLAS in base. And our ask is that all programs use the most appropriate germplasm that meets the needs of the markets and consumer preferences. And this needs to be benchmarked against the most dominant varieties. For example, if your most dominant variety is a landrace, then you need to figure out why that is so. And you need, at the very minimum, to have that as part of the pedigree of your breeding population. And this is because if you start with the wrong germplasm base, then you'll make limited progress, you'll be less effective, and your program would be more vulnerable to challenges around resilience and so, and most importantly, this would lead to low adoption of the new varieties. There is guidelines from Accelerate, and you can find this in the toolbox as well. But please, if not sure, discuss with your Accelerate cross-cutting team. And this is important because this needs to be implemented, but there is always a way of implementing them more efficiently. And how do we reach this is that all essential traits in the TPP must be represented in the breeding population. And that all those traits should be measurable. You should have assays for measuring them within the pipeline. And the earlier you can measure those essential traits in the pipeline, the better, especially if we want to use the information for earlier recycling, which is one of our major objectives. And if in case not all of those essential traits are represented in the right frequency in the breeding population, then there's need to be a strategy for sourcing that variance and deploying into the breeding population without having an effect on your genetic gain on the other essential traits. And this can be sourced from the trait discovery and deployment, which we'll be talking about in our next deep dive, and or other pipelines or gene banks as needed, depending on the situation. The next minimum standard is data management systems. And the ask is that all programs use any of the supported databases, that is EBS, BreedBase, and BMS. And this is important because it's foundational to all breeding programs. You cannot run an efficient breeding program without managing your data well. And this adoption of databases supports data integrity. It enhances your efficiency and enables analysis of complex data that are sourced from different sources so we can have additional information to make more accurate selections. And it also enhances collaboration. When we say adopting a database or using a database, we mean using it efficiently for all breeding operations, not just as a repository of all data, as might be the case across some of our programs. You can still have guidelines from the accelerated team for this. If you're unsure, please reach out. You can have support from the cross-cutting teams and, of course, the breeding resources that is developing and maintaining the databases. So why do we need this? If you don't implement this, you run a risk of data loss and poor management. You have reduced efficiency and increased labor. You are prone to errors and inconsistencies, especially if you have different naming conventions for different data sets and you cannot combine them. You have limited decision support because you don't have historical data to fall back to. And we ran into this, especially when the organization tried to started to report genetic gain. And so there was a challenge either of data quality or not enough historical data. And then, of course, there is limited use of modern tools because these require really efficient databases. For example, machine learning, predictive modeling, and automated phenotyping might require a lot of data, which needs an efficient data management system and loss of institutional memory, especially because we have staff turnover, and if material is on individual laptops, we run a risk of losing all the data and starting all over again, which is not good. The next minimum standard is statistical designs and data standards. And our ask is that all breeding programs use improved experimental designs and improve data quality using good plotmanship. This is a cornerstone for all breeding programs, and it's a cheap option with large potential to improve your efficiency, especially if you implement designs that use almost similar resources, but giving you a higher level of accuracy than just having, for example, replications in few locations. And you can access guidelines towards this in the Accelerate guidelines in the toolbox. Please reach out to the Accelerate cross-cutting team, contact person in your team, and also in your centers, your breeding analytics support, that is your biometricians or statisticians, to help on these objectives. And of course, there is need for databases to ensure that the data is quality. Why? Because this directly influences the efficiency, the accuracy, and impact of breeding outcomes. It will enhance your accuracy and reliability. You will have increased statistical power to identify genetic differences and allocate your resources efficiently. It can facilitate you implementing new methods like genomic selection, maybe artificial intelligence, and many other new tools that are coming up. And you will have resilience. You can build in resilience to climate and environmental variability by accounting for G by E, because you have enough data and statistical designs to fall back on. The next minimum standard is on analytical pipelines, and we are focusing here on BioFlow. And our ask is that programs use BioFlow for robust and standardized analysis and decision support. And how you can find support from the Accelerate cross-cutting team, especially on the guidelines. You can find support with the breeding analytics support at your center level. We do understand that BioFlow is still being developed, fixing bugs as you report. Thank you very much for those who report bugs back to us. And we are working to put together a center representative steering committee that can make decisions and collect needs of the breeding teams for the centers that they represent, so that this can be built into BioFlow to be more crop agnostic, but also to cater more for the user needs. And this will be center focus needs as prioritized through the steering committee representative. Why BioFlow? Because it hosts robust state-of-the-art models in a semi-automated fashion, and this facilitates routine selection, routine analysis and selection decisions in your programs. It implements several modules that we need for analysis and decision support. I've listed some of those there. And of course, we have other additional models like GWAS population structure that go more into trait discovery and deployment, as we'll be also focusing on that in goal number 4. And of course, as part of monitoring your genetic variation within the population, we also implementing a module to monitor that within BioFlow. The next minimum standard is quality assurance and quality control. And our ask is all programs carry out quality assurance and control, because this provides credibility and success. And it ensures that varieties meet the desired expectations. And this is necessary because even in large programs in industry, they can attest that we all make many mistakes than we think. And we have examples from our own breeding programs that this is happening. We have evidence towards that, and that's why this is important. You can have support from Accelerate guidelines. You can use your genotyping slots from breeding resources to do QA/QC, and of course, run analysis via BioFlow on this. Why we need this? We need to, of course, monitor and verify that we are true to type. We have regular audits for data accuracy. We can reduce noise, among other benefits as listed there. You can refer to those. And I will go to the next minimum standard, which is the use of a good check strategy. And our ask is that all programs use the recommended check strategy, because this ensures meaningful, accurate, and relevant comparison among your test genotypes and leads to stronger scientific, practical, and economic value of your breeding decisions. You can access guidelines from the toolbox, but also reach out to the cross-cutting team for direct support to your direct question in the breeding programs. And this is because checks have different purposes in the breeding trials. The first one, of course, being benchmarking new varieties, which is as our target product profile. We are able to standardize across environments, detect experimental errors, improve our statistical rigor, and ensure relevance by targeting relevant varieties that can be adopted. And the next is efficient on-farm verification trials, and all programs carry out on-farm verification trials to bridge the gap between the breeders and the end users. This ensures that new varieties are agronomically sound, economically viable, and socially acceptable, because we test them in real world and evaluate their performance. And in doing so, we also engage farmers and gain their buy-in. And we can accelerate adoption in this way. You can find support in Accelerate guidelines in the toolbox, or reach out to the cross-cutting team. If you're working with partners, also we want, of course, we need partners for this. So we'll be working closely on this with the AB Transform team and the breeding resources. And why? Because this enhances the relevance and the impact of new varieties, and the seed systems can make stronger cases for uptake, not basing this decision only on on-station data. And the data can also help to, and participation of the farmers can help convince them of new varieties. If we can show large enough improvements, it acts as a feedback loop to make breeding objectives more relevant, and of course can support policy changes and registration processes if data can be leveraged for release. The last minimum standard is key performance indicators. And our ask is that all programs generate and provide information needed for the harmonized crop report. This will be communicated in the few coming weeks, what is needed for that report. And key performance indicators by Reorganize and Transform, once this is implemented, can now be extracted directly from the PMP, the Breeding Portal, Bioflow, EBS, and all other platforms that we have for the harmonized crop reports. That leads to easier and standardized reporting to stakeholders and less workload to programs, especially if each stakeholder has to ask for their own reporting. How? Please access the PMP or the breeding portal, and also ask support from Accelerated Breeding. Why we need those? Because if we have KPIs in place through the harmonized crop report, which is structured, this is a measurable way to track our progress, assess success, and guide decision-making, performance measurement, and how you can evaluate yourself against peers. You can make easier decisions and allocate resources and justify budgets. You can have strategic organizational alignment and transparency and accountability, and you can continuously improve by looking which areas are lagging. And of course, we can communicate to stakeholders even if they are non-specialists. I would want to say, okay, so goal number 5 is focus on making the programs better and more efficient. And it's not about accounting to Accelerated Breeding or stakeholders, but for making the programs themselves better. I would now want to move to goal number 6. And goal number 6 is focused around accelerating genetic gain. And our ask on this is that with feasible, impactful, and in-demand TPPs, as we discussed in goal number 1 and number 2, with minimum standards in place, as we have discussed in goal number 5, the breeding teams are able to design and implement optimal breeding scheme for priority pipelines. For this is improvements that the teams need to make on their current breeding programs, and breeding programs are different stages with different resourcing and different capacity. So this is a menu of options. It should not be felt like you need to do everything at the same time. You need to prioritize what you can do at the moment with the resources that you have, what you do next and what you do next. Why? Because we want to improve the genetic value of the priority essential traits in our breeding populations. And how do we go into this? You know the usual drill: selection intensity, selection accuracy, genetic variance, and reduced cycle length as elements of the breeder's equation. So looking into the first element, that is increasing selection intensity, our ask is that breeding programs select not more than 15% for recycling purposes, depending on program size. We should also note, and we have discussed this previously, that there is diminishing returns on having large populations. So this is not an aspect of you increasing your population size to increase selection intensity. So you can reach out for support to accelerate guidelines in the toolbox or to the cross-cutting team for further support as they contact your breeding teams. Why? Because this will enable faster, more significant improvement in performance. But we should watch out for the trade-offs with other elements, especially genetic variance, and your cross-cutting team can support you to evaluate those trade-offs and make better decisions. And how do we achieve this? By making elite by elite crosses and also using multi-trait selection based on selection indices. We have recommended the use of desired gain index because we do have well-defined and prioritized TPPs. And in these TPPs, our desired gains are well quantified, and our objective is to increase genetic gain for those well-defined desired gains. The next one is on selection accuracy, and our ask is that the breeding programs review, update, and continuously improve their testing strategies to ensure more accurate selection. We need to ask ourselves, how do we better represent the TPE earlier? For example, by having representative set of on-farm conditions earlier, or mimic those on-farm conditions on station, like using stress environments, and how do we account for year effects? And those are relevant questions to achieve this. You can access accelerate guidelines in the toolbox. If in doubt or there is you don't find information, contact your cross-cutting team, and support. And some support needs also to come from breeding resources. Why? Because accurate selections ensure that the traits to improve are actually being passed on. And this makes our program faster, more cost-effective, and more reliable. And how do we reach this? We need to ensure that we have assays for all essential traits and that we can measure those at also early stages. We can increase the relevance of early testing, in this case, being able to measure traits, all essential traits at early stages, to improve the relevance also of the current testing as needed, and we can make decisions like to change locations, especially if they are consistently poor or something like that. And this ensures that we include representative on-farm conditions earlier. We can also improve this by incorporating marker information into the analysis. The next one is managing genetic variance, and the ask is that the breeding programs continuously monitor genetic variance for all essential traits This is about monitoring and not exactly maximizing this. And there's need to define strategies for managing optimal genetic variance in the breeding population. You can access guidelines in the toolbox, but also direct support from the cross-cutting team on this. And why we need this is because it affects both short-term and long-term gains in our pipelines, but there is also a trade-off between variance and gain, especially if we are recycling faster, and this now necessitates us monitoring this. But breeding teams normally overestimate the need for new variants, especially for polygenic traits that have a lot of variance and do not need consistent wide crosses. So this is not an issue of you making sure maximizing variance, but managing monitoring how it's going, especially with the recycling strategies that we are adopting. How do we reach here? Control selection strategies and mating systems like optimal cross-selection and genomic prediction of cross performance, now both implemented in Bioflow, or maintaining heterotic groups to exploit dominance variance. We can also maintain optimal population sizes. Remember, the word here is optimal to avoid drift and inbreeding. This is an optimization exercise. It does not call for you exponentially increasing your population sizes. And then, of course, looking for strategies of introducing new variants when needed from other pipelines. And this introduction should be aligned with the TPPs. The next is reducing cycle length. The breeding teams review and consistently explore novel ways to reduce cycle length, that all essential traits need to be measured earlier, as I have mentioned previously, and that we aim to use the best quality data that we have rather than waiting for later stages. You can access support from the Accelerate guidelines on how to do this more optimally, or please ask for direct support from your Accelerate cross-cutting support contact person. Why we need this? Because it's strategic and powerful, and frankly easy to achieve, cost-effective to achieve way to maximize genetic gain and to speed up your innovation to be more responsive to agricultural challenges. How do we reach this? We need to put in place mechanisms to reach the stage of parental selection in shorter time. For example, by faster advancement of generations. And the second one is that we need to select parents earlier in the breeding pipeline. And so this earlier selection needs sufficient and accurate data, why we need improved testing strategies, but also methods like genomic selection that incorporate additional information from marker data. The next is applying, of course, genomic tools in the breeding program. And the ask is that breeding programs mainstream molecular breeding tools and genomic selection. There is also a need to have clarity on the roles among the molecular breeders, and biometricians on how to go about implementing this in the pipelines. And it should, at this level, it should not be beyond any of the CGR programs to incorporate genomic data in their selection decisions. You can have guidelines from the Accelerated Breeding Cross-Cutting team if there is nothing currently in the toolbox, but also additional support needs to come from breeding resources. Why? Because this significantly improves your efficiency, your precision, and speed. And how? We need to start applying marker-assisted selection in population improvements in pipelines where possible. We can develop, and we need to develop and apply genomic selection capabilities to improve intensity, accuracy, variance, and reduce cycle length. And to be able to do this efficiently, we need to ensure that the low and the mid-density panels that we are using are representative of our target breeding populations. And we can discuss this with the Accelerate Cross-Cutting team and the breeding resources if this is a concern. Now, genomic selection is one of those genomic tools that is more common. And so we just want to provide some clarity here that genomic selection is a tool for within a breeding team that needs to be incorporated in the existing pipelines. It should not be a parallel pipeline or being implemented in a separate population just for research purposes. That to be able to be successful with it, we need to have the basics first. That's where it's very important to have feasible TPP's ability to measure all essential traits and having high quality data, among other things we have already discussed, and that it's more efficient at early stages because there is low heritability due to many genotypes and therefore few locations that can be reached, especially if we haven't implemented new experimental designs that might help us to reach more location and represent the TPE faster. And to clarify that the biggest benefit of genomic selection is in reduction of cycle length by selecting parents early, and therefore it's more focused on population improvement rather than product advancement. This is the new topic in town, breakthrough products, and Christian did make a presentation recently about this in our community of practice. The ask is varieties with on-farm performance gains that are large enough to drive faster adoption. They should be clearly recognizable improvements that are developed via product-focused population improvement and product-focused deployment of high-value haplotypes. For support, please reach out to your Accelerate Cross-Cutting team for guidelines if you do not find something that is relevant for you in the toolbox. How? Of course, a breakthrough product needs to replace one or more widely grown varieties, and it should target mainly the major markets. It has to have recognizably different improvements that are greater than 25% and should have adequate offtake potential or adoption and have greatest impact to the farmers. Now, having discussed all that, I think we have in the past given an example of the more optimal breeding scheme in different crops applying genomic selection. You can find the archetype here in this link. Just wanted to highlight a few things about the archetype, and this is aimed at, of course, improving our population improvement efforts to be able to continuously deploy the favorable alleles we are looking for and the haplotypes, and to be able to further reduce our our cycle length, and to be able to better represent farmer relevant conditions in our testing strategies early by using better designs, for example, the sparse testing design. This is how we figure the pipelines need to be redesigned and how material and data move across the different partners of a breeding network, because that's the only way this can be implemented if we want to incorporate TPE information at this stage. And also then implementing experimental designs that use optimal resource allocation at relatively the same cost than the designs that need replications in the same place. For example, the sparse testing, which can allow you to go to more locations and use genomic relationship matrices as connectivity for your data. Of course, there would be expectations on the breeding teams to implement this method, and we do have those expectations. first is developing and implementing the roadmaps towards this. What are your barriers? What are your enablers? How do you overcome them? Where are the resources? And then be able to forecast what you need to implement this, the genotyping and the genotyping support. How do you improve your data standards? How do you keep up with the crop calendars of your partners and things like that? How do you efficiently multiply and transfer germplasm? And how do you then manage and analyze the data that is coming from here? And you can see goal 6 is directly related to what we need to have in place in goal 5. So that would be the end of goal 5 and 6. And what would be our next steps? We already discussed the TPP feasibility, which was goal number 1, and priority setting goal number 2. And the Accelerate Cross-Cutting team has been meeting with different teams they are representing to discuss those now in direct support to the teams. And we will then, after that step, continue with discussing directly with the teams on what we have discussed today, that is alignment, 2, and evaluation of feasibility of breeding pipelines, and then, of course, on breeding scheme design around this criteria and the optimization, a component of that, which is falling in goal 6. I'll stop there. Thank you for listening, and we are ready for the discussion. The Accelerate team, the Accelerated Breeding team, be ready for the questions. Thank you. Back to you, Mike.
Excellent. Thanks very much, Dorcas. So over to the floor for questions and topics to raise for discussion and for any areas that may require clarification. I'm sure there's plenty of questions. Don't be shy.
Hey, Dorcas. Hey, Michael. Good morning. More than a question, will be a comment regarding the mid density panels. An example is rice, that we need to get together and review these panels because we have right now the 1K RICA panel and it's becoming the 4K RICA panel, but at least from our side, I think these panels must have more markers coming from the other breeding programs. I know that we still have to test this new panel, but I don't know, maybe because I'm too new to the CGs, we should have the opportunity to discuss what markers we are adding to these mid-density panels. So that's just a comment and something that I have noticed.
Dorcas, I'll let you comment. It sounds like we need to make a note to contact breeding resources and make sure that the panels that each of the respective breeding teams are using are relevant for their specific germplasm.
Yeah, Michael, that's a need that we have identified, and maybe Christian might comment on that.
Yeah,
yes,
Christian.
I'd like to comment on that. So, Paula, first thing I'd recommend is not wait to get together and discuss, but look at your genotype information of the material you have already genotyped. If you get good signal, if you get good segregation, a couple of quality parameters, if you want help, we can discuss that. I've done that for Africa rice for one of the programs, and we have figured out that the 1K RICA array, at least for the upland program, probably for a couple of more, is not a good strategy at the moment, and we're currently working on that. So again, everything I wanted to say, and this holds true for all the programs, have a look at that as quickly as possible. Don't rely on any kind of array you're currently working with, make sure you're analyzing your data, you're analyzing the quality of your genotype data. If you need help with that, again, let us know. And if it looks a bit fishy, if it doesn't seem very reliable, we really need to quickly look into other opportunities or other possibilities for genotyping, because this is going to be essential. This is going to be key for you to make the kind of progress that is needed for the breakthrough products. And if we now start wasting time, or even worse, use the wrong genotyping arrays, the wrong genotyping technologies, you're going to lose a lot of time here and a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Michael, I think, yeah, we still need that conversation with breeding resources that this is coming. Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that. Thank you. Flavio.
Oh, thank you, Michael and Darkus, for the nice presentation and compiling all this material. Very useful. You may have said this, but how, if I want to do a self-assessment of our breeding program, what do you recommend methodologically? Is there a tool for that? I mean,
think-
self-assessment
Yeah.
throughout, like the old BPAT, you know, but we want to do it ourselves. What would you recommend?
Well, this is, I mean, I'll let Dorcas come in a minute. This is one of the reasons that we're recommending to, as a minimum, describe the breeding scheme in Breeding Scheme Manager. I've developed a tool now for capturing the breeding scheme and doing so in a standardized way across programs, because that's a starting point that even internally, Keith, for example, could look at it and then everybody be speaking the same language when talking with breeders and so on, in terms of what's actually happening. That's been a real challenge in the past, that when we have these conversations, or even internally when these conversations are being had, that individual scientists are not singing from the same song sheet, because they're describing what they're doing in different ways, and not everybody's 100% clear on what actually is being done. And so I think that's a clear first step, is let's make sure everyone's really clear on what the scheme is, what's being done where and for what reasons and to what level, and then conversations can more readily be had about how to optimize that. So I think that's an important first step. Dorcas, maybe I'll let you come in if you've got any additional comments to make.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you, Michael. Yes, I think that's the first step. Flavio, we are also discussing on how to rank and evaluate pipelines based on those standards and that pyramid of priorities, as we have been. So we're trying to find a way of ranking programs so you can self-evaluate. But I think we are still going to be working with the BPAT anyway, moving forward. I'm not sure that is certain. Michael can comment on that. But they will still be doing the independent evaluation. But internally, of course, as needed, we can come up with a ranking system. But what we rank the programs on is the minimum standards that we just presented, and what the goal number 6 is all about.
Well, just a quick comment. I think it could be a good idea to start from BPAT and simplify it to make it a little simpler for self-assessment, not necessarily comparing across programs and ranking them, but for us to have a clear understanding of where we are and detect the opportunities for improvement. So it's something that we could do systematically every year, refresh it. So the BPAT is kind of heavy to do it frequently. So a simplified version of BPAT would be nice.
Yeah, so we've been putting a lot of. So I wanted to give Dorcas a chance to say anything else at the following on from my last comment, but then I wanted to come back and point out that before you joined the CG, Flavio, we've done a lot of work in developing harmonized key performance indicators across the system, and we're now working on how we're pulling that information together in a semi-automated way and to create and to display it in a dashboard. And we're getting very close to having that finalized now, and that dashboard is going to be called the Harmonized Crop Report. And so that'll be ready in a few weeks, we're hoping. We're working with Scriptoria to get that developed, and it will pull information from the breeding portal and it'll allow people to create uploads directly from their bioflow outputs, and it'll pull information from GlowMIP, so we can see not only the key performance indicators, but what is the relevance of the various pipelines and market segments being targeted. And so it's like it'll be a full dashboard, so you can see the projected impact, the performance indicators, and I think that will be a really useful tool for you as a manager and for your breeding team as implementers to see where they're at. And yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I don't love the idea of a ranking system and trying to say this program's better than that one. I mean, every program's different, and every program's got its strengths and weaknesses, but I understand what you're looking for. You're trying to understand, well, what specifically are those strengths and what are those weaknesses to try and address and try and do something about. And that's what these key performance indicators will help with, and they'll be displayed in the Harmonized Crop Report. So we're working towards this. Yes, the BPAT, that you're right, it's a fairly heavy approach, and it's only once every probably 3 or 4 years. We are working with BPAT together on this as well, so that when they do come in, they don't have to. I mean, traditionally they'll come in for maybe 3 or 4 days. We expect that probably what they would spend the first half of their time trying to understand in the past, they'll now just understand immediately from viewing the Harmonized Crop Report. They don't have to spend all that time with the breeding team to extract that information. It'll be there for them. So watch this space, but also be aware that you only get out of this what you put in, and the way you put in is by using these systems, the EBS, the bioflow breeding portal, and having your information updated and accurate in those systems. So I think that is probably the best answer to your question.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Miguel, nice to see you. Hello.
Hi, Michael. How you doing? Docus, everyone. Nice to see you too. I have a question because we're naming the BPAT now. Could you explain how the B40 leadership team is using the BPAT? Just, I mean, I guess you receive all the BPATs we all do, and I was just wondering.
Yeah, good question. It's been a bit of a hit and miss with receiving the BPATs, to be quite honest, because it's I mean, there's a lot of confidentiality around them. We normally end up getting them because the Gates Foundation insists, but it's not seamless. But in the end, we generally do get them, and I can't speak for the rest of the team and how they're using it. For me, I go through them to try and understand for this program what are its strengths and weaknesses, and where can we help them, and so I look for the specifics of the program to say, okay, for this program, they maybe need some help in these specific areas, and we talk as a team. Okay, ICARDA, for example, let's help them in this area and that area, because BPAT have found that that's an area that that's an opportunity for them. But also to try and get a sense, the other reason or the other value I get from it is to try and get a high level view across the system. What are the general opportunities for how we can move forward? So we do look at them, but often I mean, I think often we know a lot about these things from working with the breeding teams. Sometimes I mean, the BPAT can go much deeper than what we're able to, and I find that we get the most value in that sense when we're actually part of the conversation. And there's been examples of that where one of the team, like Dorcas or somebody, has been able to join the review, and that's been, I think, quite valuable for us as a team to have somebody there hearing firsthand how the discussions are going.
Okay, thanks. Because I was wondering if you would use it for, I don't know, to set the baselines for programs, or to actually drive specific investments, these kind of things, set priorities, for example, that we're talking now.
Not so much. I mean, the priorities, priorities are being done at two levels. Obviously, the centres we're asking at the moment for the centres to make prioritisation decisions themselves. For pooled funding, they're moving towards a new approach, and I don't want to speak for Peter as the interim director, and Peter will soon be handing that over to the permanent director. But I know that Peter is working closely with Sandra to move to a new system that is not based on for resource allocation of pooled funding. This is so prioritisation at that level. And there, I know that he's looking to move away from, well, this is historically how money has gone, and moving towards looking at the impact opportunity. So the stuff that we discussed in Dubai, and an evolution of that approach. I know that he's also looking to incorporate to go beyond just for example, what is the level of poverty? What is, this is the impact opportunity. What is the level of poverty, or what is the level of malnutrition, or whatever? To go beyond and look at, well, what's the strength of the seed system in place once a variety is developed? What's the likelihood of it being taken up? So it's on that space. To also consider, well, what are the alternative suppliers of germplasm? If the CG wasn't developing varieties, is there private sector there? Are there strong NARs? To also consider to what extent the program is successful in developing varieties. I think this is the piece that you're asking about. So it's a very long-winded answer to get to this point. And I think he wants to incorporate, I mean, if programs, for example, haven't shown that they can prioritize, and they continue to do a little bit everywhere, and they can't concentrate their breeding efforts on the most impactful market segments, then I understand that he's looking to incorporate that into the decision-making process as well. Now, how all of this gets put together is still being worked through. I mean, these are conceptually some of the things that he's looking to incorporate into that decision-making process. And so it's not necessarily look at BPAT and say, well, BPAT said this program's not very strong, so we're going to give them less money. I don't think it's like that. It's going to be more like, well, we asked these programs to do these things that we're doing in the accelerated breeding goals, meet the minimum standards, go through a prioritization exercise, etc. And then I think that every program will be successful in doing this. It's really only those that are not showing interest. It's not that I don't think programs will be penalized for coming up against genuine challenges and bottlenecks. It'll be just, if there are programs that just say, look, we're not really that interested in these things, thank you very much, then Peter's saying, well, okay, well, that was part of what the previous funding was for, was to do those things. We can't fund you twice for the same thing, so maybe it'll have an impact going forward. So I think that's the long answer. Not so much that we look at BPAT, but more what is the level of success in achieving these goals that we as a community, ourselves as a group, have set. I mean, these goals were set with input from the crop leads.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions, comments, or discussion points? while we wait for, oh yeah, Filippo.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I was going to keep it, but since you have time, I'm going to ask a couple if you don't mind. One element is about the on-farm trial. I have a little bit of an issue in seeing them under accelerate breeding goals, because on-farm trials typically happens way past your recycling point. So you've already recycled by the time you come to those, typically involve less number of lines. So they're not very good training exercises. They tend to have lower irritabilities than other trials that we're running. Probably you collect less traits than other trials you're running. So shouldn't that be moved maybe to, inclusive delivery as a demand creation opportunity rather than accelerated genetic gain? I don't think they really belong here.
So firstly, accelerated breeding and the Accelerate HLO is about the entire breeding process. It's not just about up to the point of recycling. And you're right about those points, that it's the pointy end of the program. And the reorganized team, as part of the last phase in the initiatives, as part of the Accelerated Breeding Initiative, that reorganized work package went through at length with all of the programs and came to a consensus view that of a breeding pipeline model. And this is the last stage of the breeding process before what we're saying, the seed system gets involved. So this is the data that's generated to help that system make decisions about what they take forward. And so really it is the last step, and it's the last stage of the breeding process. And we can share that process model with you if that helps. Yeah, so it has been thought through, and it's it's the last stage of the breeding process, and it's within the scope of accelerated breeding, and then inclusive delivery are involved thereafter.
A second one, if you don't mind, it's about variance. I saw that coming up. I'm not completely certain we have a place right now for reporting the variance that we're using in the program. And if there is, maybe if you can help me find what that is. And the second question would be, do we have an official guideline on when? I mean, how I would assume with Marcus, but there's also a how question and a when question. I mean, when would you like the variance to be reported as the parents you're selecting out of the total rather than variance overall? I don't know. What is your thinking there? I mean, there's something. Oh, Dorcas, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment we don't have. I'll throw it over to Dorcas in a minute. At the moment, we don't have a place to report variance. At the moment, if I go back, if I think back to Dorcas's presentation, a lot of what she was talking about is please be thinking about your variance and think about, like, for example, using one of the forms of optimal contribution selection so that you can be managing variance. And I know the team are thinking about recommended ways for how. And Dorcas, maybe I'll throw it over to you for those other questions.
Yeah. Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Filippo. With the monitoring of variance first, that would be something that would also be in the harmonized crop report, especially with the variance estimates that come from our mixed linear models. But we, as a measure of that, we are also developing another module for looking into genic variance and estimating the ratio between the genetic variance and the genic variance that we'll be using for this monitoring. This is what we have agreed upon as a breeding analytics team, which is different from what BPAT has been recommending, to use the effective population sizes for this purpose. And we have our reasons why we are implementing this method, but it would be part of the harmonized crop report once we finish the module and once you submit the metadata as needed. Thank you.
Thanks, Filippo. I noticed that Peter Coldrake is on the call. Peter, I don't know if you were on the call. We were talking just before this meeting, and I know you had a call with Sandra, and so you weren't here at the beginning. Did you catch my response to Miguel's question, and did you have anything to add or correct from what I had said?
Yeah, no, thanks, Michael. Thanks for the opportunity. No, I mean, you said it correctly. I think what Sandra and I are looking to do is to hold people accountable to deliver what they say they will deliver. And so if you say you're going to focus on X number of pipelines and so many market segments, then okay, the intent is to hold you accountable to delivering products where you said you would deliver them. I think as far as evaluating where programs are at, we need to put sort of stepwise progression of sort of advancement of programs. We don't need necessarily everybody to be doing genomic selection everywhere all the time. Other programs, we may say, hey, we're comfortable a stage or two behind that. So just getting definition of where people are at and then getting definition of where we expect them to advance to is what we need to use things like BPAT and evaluation of programs for. So it's not, we want everybody to be at the same stage and we're going to say, no, this program is not as efficient or as advanced as another. We're going to say, this is where this program is at. These are our expectations of where we'd like to see that program move to, get those defined and agreed to, and then come back and look and say, was progress made towards getting to the next stage and fulfilling the deliverables that were set out. So, at the end of the day, to me, it's just bringing more accountability into the system and being clearer about what we will deliver, when we will deliver it by, and having the data mechanisms and the reporting mechanisms to say, were we successful doing that? Yes or no? And we certainly appreciate and accept that, in a number of cases, there'll be reasons that goals weren't achieved. But if there are no substantial reasons for why a goal was not achieved, then I think we're reserving the right to say, well, okay, do we reallocate funding from something that wasn't successful to another area and give that new area a chance of being successful? So that's all that we're trying to do, was bring accountability to the system, get clear definition of what the expectations are, and then being able to measure against those expectations and say, do we achieve it? Yes or no? Is there a good reason we didn't achieve it? Okay, we accept that, we move on. If there's not good reason for why we didn't achieve a goal, then let's have a discussion, and let's have a discussion about the implications of why it wasn't achieved. And that's where we start to reserve the right to prioritize and move funding as deemed appropriate, and as we want to maximize the value that we get from any investment that's made. And so the only way to do that is set clear goals, hold people accountable, and measure the output, and make decisions based on that. So that's my summary. That's the direction that we want to start moving. And so you can see a number of the building blocks that we've put in place, a number of the goals that we're talking about in this meeting and previous meetings are all laying the groundwork to allow us to do that. And so that's where we're going.
Excellent. Thanks, Peter. And Peter, correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand that it's likely that the Gates Foundation will be probably taking a similar approach going forward in a way that they haven't so much done in the past, because they themselves, the project officers, are under a lot of pressure and scrutiny by Bill Gates to ensure that this next round of investments really is delivering products and having the level of impact that they're expecting. And so my understanding is that they'll probably be taking a similar approach, systematically be reviewing the likelihood or reviewing, are these programs on track to deliver this thing that has been committed at the end, and if they are not, to probably shift resources. It wouldn't be a case of just well, there's this grant for this 5-year project, and so we've got it locked in, that they would be regularly reviewing and possibly shifting resources to where those products are going to most likely to be being delivered. Do you think that's possibly do you think I'm right in understanding that, Peter?
No, I agree with you that Gates are going to become much more deliberate in saying what are the expectations of their investment? What do they expect to see? The breakthrough products is the first step in that direction. They've clearly defined what a breakthrough product is, and we're working with them to define, okay, what's the timeline that will take to develop that breakthrough product, and equally as important, what's the reference point for the performance of that breakthrough product? So when they say 25% advantage, it's 25% advantage over what, right? We need to clearly define these things so that we can see, are we making the progress that we're making? Clearly, Gates Foundation is looking to hold Sandra accountable. Sandra's looking to hold the director of B4T accountable for the delivery against the expectations that Gates has. And so there's a new level of accountability that's coming into the system that we all have to accept and say, no, we need to understand the expectations, how we do against those expectations, and we need to have metrics and indicators in place that can easily help everybody understand, are we on track to deliver, or are we starting to lose ground and we won't be able to deliver? If that's the case, we need to explain why, and then we can move forward. But clearly there's a new level of accountability expected from the Gates Foundation, and there's a new urgency to deliver products that will truly have an impact that can be seen in farmers' fields. And so, you know, we're moving to that level of, yes, we're funding this. These are the traits and specifications of what the products are that we expect to be developed, and this is the timeline that we expect to see those products in farmers' fields. So, just more definition, more clarity about what the expectations are, more clarity about where funding needs to be directed and focused. That's the direction that we're going. So in part, Gates are driving some of this. In part, the CG is driving some of this. But I think at the end of the day, we'll all benefit from being able to say, yes, we understand what we're doing. We delivered these products, and we can justify the investment that's being made. And hopefully, by doing that, we can attract increased investment and be able to do more. But until we can show that we can focus, we can deliver what we say we can deliver on the timeline that we can do it, and we clearly have metrics in place to say we're making progress, that's what this is all about. And that's why we're having these discussions. That's why we've set these goals. That's why we're making this as transparent as we can to everybody, so that we all understand what we're being asked to do, what the expectations are, and we have an understanding of how we're going to be measured against meeting those expectations.
Thanks, Peter. And just for everyone to know, I mean, many of those metrics and indicators that Peter is talking about we're aiming to have them in that harmonized crop report. And just once again, just to reiterate, that will be pulling information from the systems that are in place, such as the breeding portal, the uploads from BioFlow, EBS, etc. And so there's going to be real incentive for programs to be using those systems and using them well, and having the information up to date and accurate, because otherwise those indicators and metrics will not be describing your situation like it really is. Thanks, Peter. Ephraim.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just asking a question about the TP, target population environment. As you know, this is a must-have platform for breeding pipeline or testing pipelines, and developing a product that would serve that those are target environments. However, to establish these TPEs can be achieved using several approaches, some of which being maybe relatively cheap, others relatively costly, and maybe to deliver might require some time. So my question then would be, at the CG level, do we have an understanding of which cost-effective TPE determination approach would be, and probably mainstream these across the CG centers?
Great question, and very important to understand the boundaries of your TPE. I'm going to throw it to someone from Dorcas's team, maybe Christian or somebody could speak to this. Methods for understanding the TPEs and the boundaries between them. Christian, I know we've talked about this. I'll let you.
Yeah, I can come in. So this is a really, really tricky one because there's no clear-cut rule. Sometimes in literature you would see genetic correlation measurements, and people would say, well, you at least need a 0.8 correlation or something like this, but it really depends. So this is why first thing, on-farm testing is so important, because on-farm, well, the farms, they're our true target population of environments. And if you're targeting a certain region, which, I don't know, you're targeting a set of different countries, for example, that you want to address with your pipeline that you think are part of your market. Well, we need a good, solid set of data sampled from these farms, these environments, to understand if they're behaving somewhat equally or if there are strong differences. And if we have that, well, again, we can start looking into genetic correlations and can have discussions. Is this similar enough? Does it justify targeting all these regions with the same pipeline? Or do we, for example, find patterns that separate this region into, for example, two subsets where we wouldn't expect to make a lot of gain anymore if we test in both and if we weight both, and again our varieties behave very, very different here. That probably was a bit was not very intuitive. I would recommend that you reach out and we can have a separate session on this and have a discussion for, I don't know, half an hour or something. And I can give you some slides, a little bit of background, and then we can discuss how we get the data you need and how we can make the decisions that are required to figure out if the regions you're covering should be considered a single TPE or we see very, very strong different genetic signals.
Thanks, Christian. Yeah, I think a follow-up would be good, but Christian and Dorcas, I think if we can develop some cost-effective guidelines. I mean, I know it's tricky to do it cost-effectively and to do it at the same time to do the job well. I mean, for an established, so let's put that on our agenda to work on that. For an established program and a mature program that is that somewhat does already understand their TPEs and is generating data from those TPEs, then there are, albeit perhaps suboptimal, ways to refine that. For example, they can look at the on-farm data that they're getting from on-farm testing. If they're doing on-farm testing, it's somewhat challenging still because there's very little variance left at that point. So that's suboptimal. They can look at the correlations between late testing sites. They're typically exclusively on research stations, and so like Christian pointed out, it's not really the full TPE. There's some assumptions there that they are representative of the TPE, which and those assumptions may or may not fully hold. And again, even at that stage, these are selected sets, and so there's less variance, but there should still be enough there that could be useful if there's enough of those sites. So these are all things that can be used, of course, which all of you know. Yeah, but then if there's for a program that's sort of starting out or is less mature or has less idea of the TPEs, then it's a challenging thing to cost effectively answer that question. But let's follow up offline, and also let's come up with something as a group. There's an internal comment now to the cross-cutting team that we can give some guidance on this in the future.
Yep, Michael, we probably also could have a COP meeting on this, presenting what is, well, the theoretically best solution, what is required, and then have a long discussions with all the breeders involved to come up with what is realistic, what is a reasonable, practical solution, and then when we have all the input, we can come up with some guidelines.
Yeah, thank you. Excellent question, Ephraim, and a tricky one.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All right. Well, thank you all for your time. Thank you so much, Dorcas. Great job. That was a lot of material to cover, and I was really putting the pressure on to make sure that we've got time for discussion and questions, and you did that beautifully. So great job, and thank you very much for putting that together. Thank you everybody for your time. Flavio, I see that you've got your microphone off. Did you want to come in or with a question? No, okay.
No, just to say thank you.
Oh, okay, no problems. Well, thank you everybody. Thanks for your time. I know you're all really very busy. We'll put the next one on the calendar in 2 or 3 weeks' time. I'll put that out in the next day or two, so that you can be ready for that one. And I look forward to seeing you all again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Few early minutes.
Thank you.
Bye.
Mm.